Hey folks, this is Meredith from the Papery Craftery, and today I am sharing sort of a bonus Valentine's Day, late Valentine's Day, but something I wanted to share, didn't want to put off until next year. We're going to be making hearts, but we're going to be making them out of swirls of quilling paper. I'm going to be using a red and pink variety pack. I have a needle quilling tool here. That's going to be important. You're going to want to have a needle tool. I have regular Elmer's glue in a squeeze bottle. A ruler might come in handy if you like to be really precise. You might want to grab a ruler. And also a small pair of scissors. We're going to use those at some point later on. And then we are going to need some place to build our heart. So I have my cork board covered with wax paper and some pins. And if you find your fingers get dirty, you might want to have a little damp piece of paper towel that you can wipe off your fingers as you're quilling. Now to start with, we're going to go over a refresher on how to make swirls. I have a video about this that I refer people to all the time. It shows a bunch of different ways to make swirls, but we're going to kind of do a quickie recap just to get started here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a few different colors of quilling paper. Your swirls can be all the same color. There's no rule to say what colors they have to be. Obviously, I like to do a variety, sort of an ombre idea, like a dark color, and then using different variations of that same tone to get to a lighter color. Oops, sorry about that. I just think, one, it just adds a little bit more of a dimension to the swirl, but it also is going to be helpful on camera to show what I'm doing when I'm making them, to have different colors and different layers. So I have 3 shades from that red and pink assortment. And the first part of making swirls is that you want to have your paper all the same size strips, and you want your ends to be torn. I say this all the time. I'm like a broken record with torn paper, but it's very important in swirls because you're going to be rolling it around your needle tool, and having torn edges is going to make the start of your swirl a lot smoother. There's not going to be kind of a bump at the beginning. This is where the ruler comes in. Like I said, if you like them to be really precise, you can use a ruler and measure. If you want to just eyeball it with your hand, that's fine too, but you want to get them, all the strips in each part of your swirl, to be about the same size. Now, to make this heart, I'm going to be making 2 swirls of the same size. So it looks like I'm just ripping a lot of paper here. I'm ripping enough for both swirls. So they're both going to be the same size. So all the strips for both of them are going to be the same size. I'm not using all of these pieces for each swirl. I'm going to split them in half evenly here. So I have 4 for the first swirl, and then I'm going to make the same thing again, and I have 4 strips for the other side. So once you have your strips all done, you're going to start stacking them in whatever order you want. So I'm going from darkest to the palest and stacking them right on top of each other, holding them a little bit from the edge, and putting my last one on there. I have them in the order that I want them to be in. Now the next part to do is we're going to be putting a very small amount of glue right on the very tippy edge of each piece, right between each one, so they're all sandwiched with a little bit of glue. And we're just gonna dot not a lot of the glue, and just like that, a very small amount. There you go. Pinch that together, smooth it all out from both sides, front and back, and the sides. You really want everything to be on the same level, and that's the smallest amount of glue right there on the very edge. Just to remind you, you don't need a lot for this. And I go into a lot of detail on this in that other video as well. But when you're swirling, you're not really using the tool to get it started. You're using your other hand to really mold the very end of that bunch of papers around the tool just to get it started. You really kind of have to push them around. It's a very much a feel thing. Once you get it, but you might have to practice that a few times. Once I get a few rolls done on my tool, I take it out and I have something like this. You don't have that whole swirl effect just yet, but you got it started in the center there. Holding them from the sides, very important, just from the sides. You're going to pull one strip at a time, and that is what's going to give you that spiral around the eye that you created on your tool. You're going to play with this until you're happy with what you get. So there's 4 strips there. They're not super even. So I'm going to move this one again. You can even push them back in if you find, oh, the gap between those 2 strips is a little big. You can gently slide them back in. As long as you're holding it from the side and not the top and bottom, you can move those strips in and out. Once you're happy with the swirl, you need to get the tail of it all set so that you don't lose what you have. You want to make sure you're holding it from the sides that whole time. Notice I have not moved that hand, so my swirl has not come apart. And now I want the peak of my heart to kind of have a shingled effect to it. So I cut each strip on the tail a little bit longer going down, and then I'm going to put some glue in between each of the layers. You can also snip all these at the same point. If you don't want to have the shingled effect, it's up to you. I could have just cut these straight across and just glued them all that way. I'm going to run my fingers back and forth over them again. This is the part that might get your fingers a little bit gluey. And I'm sure you can already envision how this is going to be half of a heart. We'll put that one aside. We're going to do the same thing on the other half. Exact same process. We're going to line all our strips up, and I want mine to look like a mirror image, so I'm going to put my strips in the same order. Torn edge on top, and add a little bit of glue in between each layer again. The strips are all stacked and ready to roll, so I'm going to use my fingers to push the whole stack around my tool again, just like I did before, trying to get it approximately the same amount of rolls as I did the first one. And then this is probably the hardest part of this entire project, is trying to get them as even as you can. So what I like to do is get myself organized. Okay, you might be able to see that a little bit better on there. What I like to do is holding my swirl the same way, obviously, because that's how you make them. Start off kind of eyeballing it, what I think is going to be about the same size swirl. And then just sort of hold it on top and line it up and see how close I could get it to being the same size, because if I were to pull these strips more, my swirl would be a different size. Even though all those strips were the same size to begin with, the more you move them in and out, the different size the eye of that swirl is going to be. So I was pretty happy with the size right there. And now lining up the back part can be a little bit tricky. Trying to juggle this, I ended up kind of messing up my swirl a little bit the first time. It's hard to do these things through the camera. Sometimes it doesn't work out as well as it does when I'm just doing it on my own. So I get that all set up again, line it up. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now let's worry about the tail part. We'll do it this way now to be a little bit easier. And I'm going to snip the back one first, because that's going to be as long as the back strip, excuse me, on the other swirl. And then I'm just going to shingle them in a little bit and make them shorter as I go. And holding it carefully to make sure I don't lose my swirl. Now I can add some glue to each layer of the tail for this one. And get that all smoothed out. And they should be pretty close to the same size. It's pretty good. The first one's a little bit bigger, but it's okay. And then to make the heart, all you have to do is just add a little bit of glue between the swirl and then add a little bit of glue to where the tails meet. And that's about, a little bit longer than I thought it needed to be. There we go. That's about it to make a heart out of swirls. You can use some pins if you would like to. Sometimes the swirls, because of the way that the paper is rolled, they sort of bounce around off of each other. It's hard to, they got a lot of spring to them. So I would recommend pinning these together while they dry, just to make sure that you don't lose your shape. And that's pretty much it to this heart. And I have a couple of variations here, different colors, doing the same ombre effect, but having the white on the outside, different sizes, a super mini one right there, which is really cute. You can add more strips. You can make your swirls, 10 strips wide if you want to. It's completely up to you. Sort of a off-center heart right there. Go crazy with this. Swirls are really fun. It's a great tool to have in your pocket because you can use that technique for all kinds of different projects. I also wanted to show another way to make a heart out of swirls. Small variation, just adding a little bit more detail to the same idea. So this time I'm starting out with 5 strips and stacking them up the same way I did last time. I already have one half of my heart done. You can see it to the side there. I made that exactly the same way as I did in the first heart. But then the second half is going to be a little bit different. Have all my torn edges all lined up there. Tiny bit of glue in between. Get that unclogged for a second. There we go. Tiny bit of glue in between each layer. And then get that all evened out and glued. And now we're going to start off the same way that we have been, holding it right on the edge of my needle tool and then really squeezing and turning, squeezing and turning, squeezing and turning. A few turns. Now this one I'm not as concerned about having it be even with the other swirl that I had already made, because this is not going to be a symmetrical heart. This is going to be a little bit different. So I'm trying to get a swirl that I like, pushing and pulling till I get the shape that I'm happy with. And that looks pretty good. Let's keep it there. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to carefully move my hand down towards the end of the tail and snip everything off. Notice I have not glued anything on that part yet, so if I let go of this, it's going to go flying. I don't want that to happen, so I make sure I keep holding it from the side so I don't lose my swirl. Open up the layers on the tail end that I just snipped and adding a little bit of glue between each layer on that side. Now this does go against what I said before about making sure that you have torn edges when you're doing these swirls, when you're rolling it around the tool. If you try to tear those, you would definitely lose your swirl. So it is just slightly trickier to get this started. We're going to push and spin the tail end in the opposite direction to make sort of an S-shaped swirl. Now that is going to be the other side of our heart. So there's the one I made in the beginning that I didn't show on camera. Putting that up against the other one. See if I like the shape. Snip that off a little bit. So now you have a swirl heart with a little swirl on the end for a little bit more detail. You can make these asymmetrical if you want to. You can make one higher, one lower. Play with them until you get the idea that you like. But I thought this would be another fun way to make your swirls into hearts. Pin it together, keep it all in place while the glue dries. And I have a couple more of these that I have made as well. Oopsie. I'm going to show in a second. There you go. That one looks pretty similar, but a little bit more even. And then a teensy tiny one right there. You can even, I don't know if you want to put a heart inside of a heart. Play around with something like that. I don't know, go crazy. You can do anything you want with these. It's just an idea. As always, it's a starting off point to get your creative juices flowing. Even though Valentine's Day has just passed, you don't have to save these hearts for a whole year. You can use quilling paper hearts anytime. You know, Mother's Day is coming up, so you might want to think about practicing these now, adding them to your Mother's Day cards or whatever projects you have. Hearts are always great year-round. As always, if you have any questions about the techniques that I showed today, leave those in the comments down below and I will answer those as soon as I can. I will make sure to link to that swirl video that I had mentioned earlier that has a couple different other variations to it, a little bit more detail. I'll link that in the description box. Any supplies that I use, I will add those as well. And I also have a few more heart videos that I will leave linked up down there in case you want to practice different types of hearts. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss the next time I share a video. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.